Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. So this is going to be kind of a weird movie to talk about in that it's one of those kinds of movies where it's about someone's life and it's in like a reverse order, so it starts out kind of confusing and then slowly as it goes through it makes sense. So this was a movie I'd planned to watch a while ago. I remember seeing commercials for it and stuff before it was in theaters, and I'd meant to see it in theaters, and sometimes I just kind of space out or I get too busy with stuff and then the movie's not in theaters anymore and I forget about it and whatever. This one I knew like a little bit about before I'd actually watched it. I didn't get to go in as completely blind because I read the newspaper, but only really like on Sundays. I mostly just read like arts and culture sections of newspapers to find out about like musicals coming to theaters near me and stuff. And anyway, sometimes there's sections that are about like actors or about movies. And this was the movie that was in there. I'd seen the commercials. I knew about this movie already, but I'd read about it. It wasn't anything that was like too much as like spoilers. It was more talking a little bit about some of the actors and their characters in the movie. And it's kind of funny because like months later, by the time I actually ended up watching this, which was well, for me it was yesterday, I had forgotten mostly like the stuff that I had read, but then when I got to certain parts it immediately just kind of flooded back to me and I kind of better understood the context for this. So this movie I ended up watching with friends. We have this thing where it's like if it's someone's birthday, it wasn't my birthday was a while ago at the time I'm recording this, but since I like joined the group recently, they're like, hey, your birthday passed, Bumble, you get to pick the movies for the week. So I picked this one, I picked The Great Muppet Caper, and I picked Tangled, and those other two we still haven't watched yet. You'll get reviews on those once I've watched them. But this one was interesting to watch with a group. I actually almost didn't pick it because this is kind of a more serious, a bit existential movie, and I feel like when you're watching with a group of friends, not that you can't watch anything serious or whatever, I feel like it's sometimes harder because naturally if you're watching movies with a group, you know, people will talk or be silly or make jokes about things or just whatever, you know. And for kind of serious movies like this, it's easier for me to focus, especially when like this we have to like really pay attention to like what's going on and stuff. I probably would have focused better if I watched it by myself, but then someone rented it and we all agreed to like watch it and stuff, and I was like, okay, maybe this will turn out fine. And it did. It was interesting because there was someone who would point out things, and there's like a lot of characters and things to pay attention to, and some of those things I caught and some of those I didn't, so it was kind of nice having other people that also noticed the same stuff, or we were talking about our theories through the movie. It was also kind of interesting watching this where everyone else in this movie was going in blind. No one else in the group had heard about this movie or seen ads for it, which I felt was kind of weird because I remember seeing a lot of commercials for this on TV, you know, outside of the thing I'd read in the paper. So it was interesting watching this where I sort of knew what was going on, not everything all the time, but I knew it was about a guy named Chuck and about his life story being told backwards, and the whole thing of like the universe revolving, like the day he dies is when the universe ends and stuff. So it was interesting watching this and seeing everybody be confused for most of it and stuff, or sometimes we had to like explain to other people like what was going on, and their theories were interesting to listen to. Not that I knew exactly everything that was going on, but I knew like a bit more than everyone else, so I sort of could tell if they were right or wrong about stuff. But yeah, I'll describe the plot a little bit and then I'll go through my notes. So this movie, it's divided into 3 acts and it goes backwards through the life of a man named Chuck, where the 3rd act is the death of the universe, but also the death of Chuck. And he doesn't die as an old man or anything. The whole thing is he dies of some kind of like brain cancer or something when he's 39. It's like a very important plot point. And then the 2nd act is Chuck as an adult. There's a lot of dancing in it. It's kind of more fun. And then the 1st act is the one that's most focused about Chuck, because the story gets like more and more about Chuck as it goes on. Like in the third act, he's like dying. You don't even get to see him for the first like 20 minutes of the movie, and it's focused on all these other people that you don't really know. And then the first act, which is the end of the movie, is about like Chuck's childhood, and it's kind of interesting because the further you go, especially once you get to that first act, the more you start to not only notice like certain characters in the background or just the way that things connect to each other. You're kind of given more context until it drops the two big bombshells, especially the end. Oh my gosh, the ending was pretty crazy with this movie. This is like a very heavy movie towards the end, to the point where everyone in the group, once we got to the ending, just kind of needed something light, so we were watching like YouTube poops and stuff, because I was even planning to go to bed after I watched this movie. I was very tired. I hadn't really slept in a couple days, but I straight up said, like, guys, I can't go to sleep after seeing that ending. Not that in a way like it was something terrifying like watching a horror movie and you're just awake the rest of the night, but more so it was just going to be on my mind. You know when you watch something very like emotionally heavy and then you're kind of thrown off the rest of the day? It was going to be like that. And I did end up getting some sleep. I got like sleep for the first time in like 3 days. It was great. So watching something funny afterwards worked. Actually, that is my suggestion if you watch this movie, is just watch something light, even if it's like some silly videos on YouTube afterwards, and just kind of balance it out a little bit. I think you might need it. Okay, so I'll go through my notes, which are just, I don't actually have a ton of them. They're just like general notes about things, or more so my reactions to stuff as I was watching. So the third act, with part of the thing of the universe dying and stuff and the world ending, is the internet being gone forever. I liked, there was this conversation someone had about how I remember what life was like before the internet and we were able to survive, but how are we going to survive now? And I've been thinking about that ever since I finished the movie yesterday. I mean, I wasn't alive like I was going to say the internet wasn't from 2005. The internet's from like the 80s, or 90s? No, computers were 80s, internet was 90s. Google's the one that's 2005. Yeah, I'm older than Google, but I'm not older than the internet, so it's kind of just been around my whole life. It's weird. It's like I'm after the internet, but before like social media, just that kind of space. But yeah, the characters freak out about the internet possibly being gone forever. There's this conversation that was kind of funny, but it was like completely serious in the context of the movie, the way it was acted. As it starts off with this teacher, I think his name is Marty, and he's talking to the parents of his students and stuff. And this is like before the world. It's like when the natural disasters are happening. There's like something that happens in Northern California, some like 0.9 earthquake, and then a bunch of other things happen like simultaneously around the world or whatever. But it's like this teacher talking to students of his parents, and there's this one guy who they're trying to like talk about his kid's grade or something, and he's just like, Pornhub's down, and he looks so depressed about it. And what made it funny wasn't just that of all the things is what he's focused on, besides the whole like, hey, natural disasters are happening around the world, and yeah, sure, the internet's gone or whatever. He's more upset about this guy, I don't remember what his name is, Pornhub being down, than he starts talking about how like his wife like leaving him or something, and I'm like, that's the thing you should be more concerned about, dude. Like, sure, Pornhub's down, go get like a magazine or something. You can fill that void. But yeah, the world is seen like ending everywhere and stuff. My friend, because we rented this on YouTube so we could pause stuff, paused the movie. There's this NPR host guy you hear throughout the third act, and he mentions about something called a Suicide Squad, and my friend had to pause the movie because he was thinking about the DC movie, and then we started talking about Suicide Squad for a while, and then we went back to the movie. There's a lot of well-known actors in this. I was surprised because the two sort of things I remembered from the commercials, which they're just like TV ads. They weren't really short. They were just like trailers and stuff. And part of the reason the reason I was sort of interested in this in the first place, Tom Hiddleston plays Chuck. He plays the main character, and that the ads for this movie show him like dancing in the middle of a street or something. I swear I don't remember them talking about like the world ending or whatever. I didn't know it was going to be that kind of, it's not an apocalypse movie or anything. Like, it's only the world ending stuff in the third act. But the thing is with those ads and what I mentioned is the dance stuff is only one scene, and it's in like the middle of the movie, and that's kind of about it. And the rest of the movie does not have that happy tone for the most part. Well, there's more dancing as the movie goes on, but like not some kind of like, we're gonna dance in the middle of the street like it's a musical number type thing. And two, let me think. Yeah, Tom Hiddleston's barely in this movie, maybe for like 10-15 minutes. It's really only during the second act. I mean, he's in the third act, but he's unconscious. And then the first act is about him from being a child to a teenager. So he's really only in the second act, but it's funny because he's in all of the posters and everything where you think he's playing Chuck like the entire movie or something. I mean, to be fair, his image is seen throughout the third act in kind of a really creepy way where his face is sort of just everywhere, but it's not like him, the human Chuck, out there doing things and whatever. It's really weird. So I was actually a little disappointed because like the short bits we do get to see him as this character, I liked it. I thought it was fun, but that's like barely any of the movie. Oh yeah, there's a space background on this poster. I was wondering about that like before I started the movie, but it makes sense with this whole message of like multitudes inside you. That's like the big key thing from this movie, and that gets brought up and makes sense like as you go further through. I'll explain it when we like get to that part. But yeah, there's a bunch of well-known actors in this. Like Mark Hamill is Chuck's grandfather. I didn't even recognize him. Like, I sort of recognized his voice, but I didn't recognize his face. I mean, I don't know how old he is now, but he looks like pretty old. The actress that plays Amy in Doctor Who is one of the characters. She plays a character named Felicia, who's one of the like main characters of the third act. And then you see her like throughout the movie, her and the character the other one I mentioned, Marty. But they're more of like background characters and stuff, and there's a reason for that. I swear I thought the narrator was Nick Offerman, but I'm not sure. I haven't like Googled that to confirm, but it sounded a lot like him. Just like a bunch of people I recognize, and I was surprised for this being a movie. It's actually pretty short. I think it's just like an hour and a half. And especially because they're all playing characters, well, except for Mark Hamill's the grandfather, that aren't really actually that important or anything, and are only kind of there in like certain sections or around. Let's see. Marty, he ends up talking about this galactic calendar, which is actually really important to the movie, but ends up popping up. It is a dialogue that pops up towards the end as well. There's a lot of like things that people say or objects and stuff that end up appearing kind of throughout the movie, and it's sort of fun when you notice it of like, hey, isn't this the object that belonged to like so and so, or we saw this person earlier, and there actually turns out to be a reason for that repetition and stuff. But anyway, when the galactic calendar concept is introduced, where it's something of like the universe, like the timeline of the universe could be divided into like a calendar of months of a year or something. Marty ends up having this whole spiel about it, and it got really confusing. My friends and I were joking of like he was going so fast, it gave the vibe of like this will be on the test kind of thing from school, where your teacher's going over all this info and it's just like you're going too fast, can't keep up with these notes or anything. Where it was actually a bit overwhelming in the movie, for me as well. Marty and Felicia, like I said, they're like the main characters in the third act, and especially at the beginning of them, they're like chatting on the phone, And then at the end of the act, when the world's dying and stuff, they're having this conversation where they're sitting together on these chairs, and Felicia's about to say I love you, and then Chuck dies and the world ends or whatever. But they're like exes, and then when the world's like finally ending is when they finally sort of get back together, not like romantically, but more so in the same space. They go to see each other in person, but just their vibe and their conversations and stuff, of them just casually chatting about things before the world, you know, supposed to end. At that point everyone's kind of just aware the world is ending. It reminded me, and I was talking about it with the group. I wasn't the person who brought it up, but we were like chatting about it, of the movie, I think it's called A Friend at the End of the World. It's a movie with Keira Knightley and Steve Carell that's sort of a similar concept of the Marty and Felicia thing, not like anything else in this movie, of like these two people that meet and get together, and it's like right before the world's supposed to end or something, and then they're like together in their last moments. It's sort of sad, but also kind of not that movie, but I'm talking about just that concept in this movie. But also I feel like it makes sense of doing something so mundane, like the world's dying, you know, you don't have much time left. You don't have enough time to like go on a vacation or something. You probably have like, I don't know, I'll make it up, like a day left or something, and you're just like talking on the phone or chatting with someone or whatever, because there isn't really much you can do in having those final connections. But I feel like realistically that probably would happen if we found out like a meteor was coming tomorrow or something. You know, you can't really do anything big and grand, you don't have enough time. So just being able to like talk to people or doing like the little things, you know, I feel like that probably would happen if the world was going to end. Though it is funny that like the world is ending and Marty's talking about like, oh, I have to go and like grade these students' tests and stuff, and it's like, dude, your students are gonna, and everyone else are going to die soon. That doesn't matter. Is that really how you want to spend your last like however much time left on Earth? Oh, there's this whole thing. Where is it? I like just looked up this movie trying to find the poster, because the phrase is, give me a second. Damn, it's not here. It's on my other Google thing. That's okay. Okay, so there's this like poster of Chuck. I was actually almost going to pick it to have as the thing on here, but I like to use the movie posters. That way if you look at the thumbnail you see like, oh, there's the title or there's the image from the movie, and you know what it is, of like, this is what Bumble's going to talk about. But there's this poster that says something with Tom Hiddleston's face on it in the movie that says, Charles Krantz, thanks for 39 great years, thanks Chuck. And the movie actually kind of seems like a horror movie at first. My friends were asking me about it as we were watching and more spooky things were happening, and they're like, Bumble, are you sure this isn't a horror movie? I mean, it is made by Stephen King, so I feel like that explains things. But it does definitely get a bit spooky at the beginning. I actually really liked that, because I didn't really like the third act at first. It kind of was going on and on. It goes on for like half an hour, and it's sort of boring in the sense of it's just mostly like people talking, and you don't really know what's going on because you're not given context for anything. But then you suddenly start seeing Chuck everywhere, and it's kind of just crazy. Like when it first happens, the TV stations just stop working and they see that phrase and that picture of Chuck, and it just appears on the TV, and it's this thing where everyone sees it before the world ends. Not just on the TV, but it's like he starts appearing everywhere, but it's like not actually him, it's just like images of him, but no one knows what it means. No one knows who Chuck is. But yeah, for most of the third act, he's just this mysterious person that like exists that no one knows. Like there's this part, especially when it gets like kind of freaky, where Marty and Felicia, they're in this neighborhood, or might be some of the other characters too, and they're outside and it's nighttime, and it's like before the world ends, like an hour before probably, and all of the lights in the neighborhood shut down. And then it felt really creepy. It was so sudden I actually got startled. There's like a loud noise, the lights shut down, and then it gets kind of creepy where these like ghost looking holograms of Chuck just appear, and they like glow and stuff inside of like every window. They're like different poses and faces of Chuck. And my friends were wondering, it was kind of funny hearing their reactions, if it was like aliens or ghosts. There was someone in the group who swore it was like something to do with aliens, but it's not. It just has to do with Chuck. But he hasn't actually even been like physically seen in the story yet. Oh yeah, Matthew Lillard's in this movie. I was gonna say he's in this character. No, he's in this movie. He's a character in this, plays a character in this movie who's this like, I don't know if he works in like electrical stuff or whatever. There's a part where he's talking about people that are in a sinkhole, but he's like smiling about it for some reason. He's talking about people in a sinkhole. They're trapped in their cars and they're going to die. That was pretty crazy. As soon as he popped up, my friends were making jokes about FNAF and stuff. There's a character named Sam. He ends up appearing later in the first act as this like funeral director and stuff, where he even gives some of the same dialogue. But there's this part where he's with Marty and they're just walking around, and in the background and stuff and around them there's all of these cars that are just abandoned because everyone's gone. It's like there's nowhere for them to go or anything, and they're just like walking and talking, you know, as if none of this is happening, about their dreams. And Sam saying of like he wanted to be a meteorologist, but ends up being in charge of this like funeral home. I thought that was kind of nice. I described it in my notes. It's like a quiet apocalypse of like people knowing that the world is going to end, and they're all really chill about it. Like everyone just sort of accepts it. It's not of like, you know, aliens invaded or people are turning into zombies or everyone's robbing stores and whatever. It's just the world is quietly just ending. It's kind of interesting to think about. I sort of like media like that. I mean, I know I did say at the beginning of this, like, oh, the third act was a bit boring, of it's just people talking. The conversations themselves are nice. I think I was just bored in a sense because their dialogue felt kind of weird. And you're just I was sitting there at least wondering, like, where's Chuck? Are all these people going to be important? Are they going to show up later in the story or anything? Because they get, like, character development and stuff here, and they do show up throughout the story, but they're more of, like, background characters and side characters. It's here where they're really just developed. And then, yeah, the third act ends where Chuck dies. It turns out he has a son, which I thought was kind of interesting. He has a wife and son, and then you never see the son again or learn anything about him. You end up seeing the wife later, but that's kind of about it. But yeah, the third act ends. Felicia's about to tell Marty she loves him, and that's it. And then goes to the second act. I don't remember what it's called, but it has like a very specific, all the acts have like a very specific name. So now we're at the point where it's Tom Hiddleston as Chuck, and it takes place, I believe, 9 months before Chuck eventually dies and the world's going to end and stuff. And we get introduced to some new characters. There's this woman named Taylor, and she plays the drums. She does a good job on the drums, actually. And there's this other woman named Janice who gets broken up with her boyfriend, and those two and Chuck end up becoming friends because of this. I don't know if I should even call it like a chance encounter. It's more of they all just kind of get involved with something, and then they end up chatting and sort of becoming not like friends, but kind of bonding over it. Oh yeah, the narrator was kind of annoying me at this point because he just has to narrate everything of like, who's this person, what's their deal, what's going on in their life, and it's just like too much information. I'm fine with narrators in movies, But I do kind of prefer the approach where it's more of like a show not tell, where you don't need to tell me every single detail about every single character in the same way as if like it was so much narration, it felt like I was like reading a book where, you know, with a book it's not visual, so you have to know every single detail about everything that's happening. With the movie, it's like you get to see all this stuff on screen, so I feel like you don't need to tell us everything and stuff. And I mean, I don't feel like that for every movie, because I mean, some of the Wes Anderson movies are like that too, but that's sort of like the style of it, I guess. But I feel like with this movie, it could have done with some like less narration, especially because it's supposed to be kind of almost mysterious, of like you're kind of kept in the dark about some things until they show up later, and just kind of letting the moments happen naturally, I feel like would have fit this movie better. And thankfully, like later on in the movie, there's like less narration and stuff. It's mostly just when like a character's introduced, but still. Anyway, it's kind of funny. The narrator's describing about how Janice, her boyfriend, sends her a text to break up with her, and she just yells out "motherfucker" after seeing the text, but like the way she says it was pretty funny. I laughed at that. What else? And then it's kind of weird, but I feel like it makes sense once you get more context of things about the universe and Chuck and how they're sort of connected, where the narrator describes how Taylor, she's the one with the drums, she sees Chuck approaching. She doesn't know who Chuck is, by the way. She just thinks, oh, it's this guy in a suit, he must be a businessman. She decides to play happier music. It's described as something along the lines of like, for some reason she saw this businessman and decided to play something more upbeat to announce his passing, and then she expected him to walk past her, and then he ends up dancing in the street. But it's just kind of almost a little scary the way it's described to me, of like how it's like she's kind of compelled to just start playing more upbeat music to like announce his presence, but she doesn't know why. She just gets that feeling and does it and stuff. Kind of a little spooky, like Chuck's that important, or even like strangers are sort of drawn to him. But yeah, there's a reason for that. Anyway, Chuck, and this is when we get the dancing scene that's in the ads. Well, it's about to be that scene. It goes on for like a while, actually, the dance scene, where Chuck, at first, he's kind of dancing alone in the street. I mean, there's people around him. He's not alone. Like Taylor's there playing the drums, but it's just him dancing. And it's sort of awkward to watch until there's like a crowd shows up, and then Janice is there and she dances with him, and that's the part that's actually in the ads of I can like clearly remember it, where they're just dancing together, which made me think, wow, this is probably going to be like a happy movie. Maybe these two end up like falling in love or something. They don't. Chuck at this point is like happily married, but they do dance together. It goes on for like 5 minutes. I thought it was pretty fun. The thing that like kept surprising me though is it's just Taylor playing the drums. I feel like it would have been cool if there was suddenly like musicians who joined in. Like the drums sound good, but I feel like it needed a little bit more oomph, I don't know, to like match with the moment and stuff. I kept expecting to hear like a saxophone or something, especially like the style. She's playing like jazz and stuff. And then it's sort of interesting that, remember I said Chuck ends up eventually dying from brain cancer? Well, he, at this point in the story, is getting these headaches. This is like 9 months before he dies, and I just find that kind of interesting. I mean, the movie never says like, oh, he goes to a doctor to have these checked out or anything, which, I mean, maybe if he did, that could have helped his life expectancy, but I thought that was interesting that it's not like he suddenly gets cancer and dies. It's like he kind of gets hints of things at first, because the characters ask him like, oh, are you okay? And he's like, I'm fine, I just get these headaches and stuff. And that's like pretty much the second act. They dance, the three of them end up chatting afterwards. They consider forming a group, and then Janice walks with Chuck until they go their separate ways, and that's pretty much the whole thing. What I thought was interesting, and when things finally started to connect to me a little more, like one of the moments that ends up kind of paying off and is explained later is in the second act. I don't remember if it's Janice or Taylor. One of them asks Chuck, like, hey, why, what, oh no, I think it's Taylor. She asks, like, why did you stop in front of me and start dancing? And he considers saying something about, like, a band he used to be in, or dancing during the instrumental breaks, and he ends up just saying, I don't know. And then that's that. But you get a reason for that later, where we see Chuck in the act 1, where he's like 7 years old. He gets to be with his grandparents, and the reason he dances in the second act is because dancing's actually a major part of his life. I actually thought that was pretty cool, where he dances with his grandma as a child. He watches a lot of like classical musicals, or classic musicals, and then he ends up taking dance classes, and that actually focuses on most of the first act. So dancing is like a really big thing for him. You know, when we first see him as a child in the first act, and I thought, oh cool, we get to see little Chuck hang out with his grandparents, and then it immediately cuts to finding out that Chuck's parents are dead, where it's like this happy scene of him with his grandparents, and then it literally cuts to the three of them at a table, and they look really depressed, and you find out, and the narrator's describing about how his parents died in like a motorcycle accident, and he has to be raised by his grandparents, and the grandpa becomes an alcoholic, and the grandma just becomes really, really closed off, and it's just like, damn, this kid cannot catch a break, huh? But yeah, then it kind of picks up again where we see Chuck dancing with his grandma, and it's kind of interesting where during the second act, when Chuck is trying to think of what to tell Taylor on why he was dancing in the street, you see this image flash on the screen for like a second, and you don't really have any context of it, of this person doing this little dance thing. You only see their hand against this, like, they're like cooking a big pot, and then you get to see that full scene in the first act, and it's Chuck's grandma, and she's doing this little dance where she starts dancing with Chuck in the kitchen while she's like cooking something on the stove, and you're like, oh okay, it's because of his grandma and everything. I like that she even has some of the same dialogue that Chuck ends up saying when he's inviting Janice to dance. I thought that was a cool detail. And then from there, it's like sort of fun for a while of them hanging out and stuff. His grandma's really the one that he ends up being close with. I just thought him dancing with his grandma was really sweet. And then there's this mysterious attic that Chuck's family does not want him to go to. You get the answer to that attic at the very end in the last scene in the movie, and boy, is it something. But anyway, here, some of my notes are like a little bit out of order, but I'll keep reading anyway. My friends were talking about how the actor that plays Child Chuck would make a good Peter Parker, and I agree with that. Like, we were thinking he just kind of has like one of those faces, and I don't know how to describe it, but like as soon as they were mentioning about that, I was like really looking at the actor. I thought, yeah, I can like totally see it. It kind of reminded me of, oh gosh, there was a horror movie I had watched where I said, like, this actor looks like he would play like Elliot in E.T., but now I can't remember what movie it was. Anyway, we see Chuck go to school, and it's the same classroom as Marty's. We actually do get to see Marty. I was kind of confused about it at first. We get to see Marty in the classroom next door to Chuck's, but he's an adult, even though Marty's also an adult when Chuck's dying in the hospital at 39. You think, like, that's not supposed to make sense. Why are the people around him not aging? Or like Marty and Felicia. I was so close to saying Amy there. Now Marty and Felicia, they end up at this fall fling dance that Chuck has to go to later on. You see them in the background where they're like teachers working there, and if that sounds super weird, we get the first of the big reveals. Well, there's really just two in this movie. There's the one I'm about to talk about, and the one at the end of what is inside of the attic. So the first big reveal, and it's kind of something we were all sort of theorizing anyway. I feel like at that point it's kind of obvious, but it's nice that the movie ends up telling us anyway, where, okay, I'll set the scene up for you. So Chuck has this teacher, and he's still like a child at this point. I think he's like a middle schooler at this point in the story, and she ends up putting her hands between his face, and it reminded me of that like Gordon Ramsay idiot sandwich thing. Let me pause for a second. I'm being kind of distracted by something. All right, I'm back. Sorry, I was getting really distracted. I had to put on some lotion. Anyway, so yeah, it reminded me of the idiot sandwich meme. But besides that, the teacher says this thing about what's inside of you, Chuck, and she describes it as, what's the phrase? You will contain multitudes, that thing that I mentioned earlier. And she says how there's basically like a universe in your head, and it was something we were already thinking of like, if the world was real or not, why does the universe end when Chuck dies? That's like a really specific thing. And it's not even like a prophecy or anything like that. It's more of just, it just happens and we see it, or like people that don't make sense, like the why are people adults when Chuck's a child thing. And it's because the universe is just in Chuck's head. It's not real. It revolves around him. It's probably the reason why Taylor was kind of drawn to Chuck in the first place, and it kind of explains a lot, because if anything, you know, like Chuck eventually dies of brain cancer, so at least the way I interpreted at that point was that Chuck, as he's dying, it's like a dying dream kind of thing is the way I saw it, where, or it could even happen before he dies, where he's like trying to piece together things, and maybe he doesn't remember everything correctly, and that could be why some people, you know, maybe he just remembers certain people as an adult, so they show up as an adult like all the time in his memories and stuff like that. And I feel like once you view it that way, or at least when you know, as the movie says, of like the universe is just in Chuck's head, which is, you know, why I'm assuming the background here is like this giant outer space thing with Chuck there. I feel like that just explains so much stuff about it. But yeah, that's the first big reveal, which I thought was pretty cool actually. Like, no wonder the movie is called The Life of Chuck. It all like revolves around him. We get to see a lot of Chuck's grandfather, especially once the grandmother dies. The grandfather is Chuck's sole caretaker, and there's a part I thought was interesting, and then once you find the context of what the grandfather knows, it becomes really depressing to think about, where Chuck tries to go in the attic and see what's being hidden there, because his grandparents keep that room like locked. They're like, hey, you're not allowed to go here at all, you can go like anywhere else in the house. So, you know, of course Chuck wants to know what's up there. It's kind of like that Beauty and the Beast scene where Belle finds the rose and stuff in that hidden room. Anyway, Chuck's grandfather, he like freaks out upon seeing something in the room, and we don't get to see what it is, and then he actually throws Chuck down some stairs for opening the door. It's not a lot of stairs, let me be clear on that. It's not in a way where like Chuck actually falls down the stairs and would have like broken something or whatever, but it's like a little bit of stairs, and he kind of more like yeets Chuck over the stairs where he ends up hitting a wall. And then I thought it was interesting, the grandfather does that and then immediately goes to Chuck as Chuck starts like crying and is like trying to comfort him and feels bad about doing that, but he like really doesn't want Chuck to know what's in there. And now that I know what's in there and Chuck eventually does see it a little while later, I'm just like, damn, you know, that actually wasn't that overreactive of a reaction. Anyway, then we get this whole segment that's kind of nice where Chuck he's taking this like dance club and he's the best dancer there, and there's this girl named Kat. I think she's the one that ends up becoming his wife later, but I wasn't completely sure. I wasn't sure if it was like this was a story of like him in middle school befriending this girl that he eventually marries, or just them becoming friends. He teaches everyone else how to dance. My friends were joking that Michael Jackson would sue because Chuck ends up moonwalking. And then there's this speech the grandfather gives about 23 hours in a day, and it's something that we saw earlier in the movie, and he explains about dance through using math because the grandpa like absolutely loves math. And that was the point I remembered the newspaper article, because I remembered reading about Mark Hamill's character being this mathematician, and I completely spaced out about that until I got to that point in the movie. And now I'm sitting here thinking like, damn, I kind of want to read that newspaper again, but it's been like long since recycled. And it's funny, I'm thinking about that right now, and I'm wondering, am I gonna have another moment like that again? Because I'm watching Frankenstein in a couple days, the Guillermo del Toro one, and I just read the newspaper, and there was an article about Frankenstein in there. Not enough to spoil anything, but it talked about the actors and characters the same way the article in Chuck did, and I'm like, damn, I'm gonna remember something when I watch it. But I'm going into that one as blind as I can. Anyway, but I thought that was interesting. And then I was wondering what year this movie is supposed to take place when Chuck's in middle school, because they have a Back to the Future themed prom, so I'm assuming like 80s or something. But I thought that was pretty interesting. Like, there's literally a kid at the prom, or not prom, it's the fall fling, but whatever, it's basically prom, that's dressed as Marty McFly. He even has the orange jacket and everything. I thought that was kind of funny. We see Felicia and Marty there as like chaperones at the thing. And then Chuck, you see like Tom Hiddleston like actually like 2 more times this movie, but one of those times is him when he's like, I think when he gets sick and he's talking to his wife, and she's wondering like, hey, how did you get this scar in the back of your hand? And he apparently lies to her about it, but then it turns out the actual reason for it is kind of cute, even though he does end up getting injured. Where Chuck at the dance, Chuck's kind of annoying during the dance, actually. I want to talk about that for a second. I don't have it in my notes. Where this girl that he's been befriending the whole year at his dance clubs, and they've danced together, and they're like the 2 best dancers in the club. She really, really wants to dance with him at the fall fling, and he doesn't want to dance, and he keeps making excuses. And then they eventually do dance, and they blow everyone's socks off and stuff. But anyway, she kisses him, and then he runs outside, and he's so happy from being kissed that he goes outside and dances, and then accidentally hurts himself because he cuts his hand on some like fence or whatever. I don't remember the context for this. There's a line I wrote down that just says, you're a strange one, my dear, and I don't remember what character says that or why I wrote that in my notes yesterday, but that's in here too, and that is the line from the movie, and not just writing random things in here. I'm actually so glad that I wrote these notes, because a lot of these details I actually don't remember. I was really tired when I was watching this. Oh yeah, we eventually find out that Chuck's house actually gets torn down and becomes an apartment building. That made me kind of, we don't actually get to see it, but that actually made me kind of sad, because it's like this old Victorian house that looked really cool from the inside. Okay, and then we get the ending, which is, in my opinion, the part of the movie that hits the hardest, and the part that like kind of messed us up as a group, where we needed to like watch something happy after the movie. So Chuck, when he's a teenager, his grandfather dies. Oh yeah, he ends up talking to Sam again. I forgot about that. Sam, who's in charge of the funeral home, after the grandfather dies, and Sam says some of the same dialogue from earlier. But anyway, yeah, teenage Chuck ends up inheriting everything, including the house and his grandfather's affects and stuff, which includes the key to the attic, because the attic had been locked up this whole time. And Chuck, after his grandfather, when he was a child, had chewed him out about trying to go in there and seeing whatever the grandfather saw. I guess he never tried to go back in, but now he could. And he goes in, and it's a really weird scene where it's very slow at first too. Chuck goes inside, he opens the door, we see what's inside. It's empty. And then as he's leaving, because it's like, okay, I guess the room's empty, you hear this little sound, and it's specifically the sound of the monitor from that third act. I forgot to mention about that like right before Chuck dies, every monitor in the hospital is making noise and has the number 75 on it. And you hear that monitor noise. It's like very distinct. When Chuck's about to leave the room, he turns around, and guess what he sees? He sees himself in the hospital bed in that attic, which basically means he knows that he's going to die. He doesn't know what age that adult Chuck is in, but he sees that, and he surprisingly is not like traumatized by seeing his older self on his deathbed or anything. Instead, he decides from that point on to live life from the fullest. And it's interesting because the movie also shows the grandfather, and you don't get to see what the grandfather saw. Okay, no, let me clarify. Chuck didn't see the grandfather in that room either. It shows the little flashback of like the grandfather peering inside the room, and we don't see what the grandfather sees, but the narrator kind of hints of like, oh, the grandfather probably saw himself die because he dies from a heart attack. So it's basically a room that like shows you see people die when you look in. I don't know if it's like you see every loved one that is going to die in there. It sounds like it's like you just see yourself in the future die. I mean, Chuck got sort of lucky that all he saw was himself in a hospital bed. That could have been any number of ways you could die. The grandfather probably, from what it sounds like, saw himself with his hand on his chest, clutched down on the floor. You know that's got to be a heart attack. But that's what's crazy. Like, my friends and I had very different reactions to seeing this ending, where some of them were confused or upset. I'll be honest, I didn't really know what to feel when I finished this and I got that ending. I was still like trying to like process it as the credits were going by and we were talking about the movie and our thoughts on it and stuff. And I do have some final thoughts on this. Let me actually go over those first. The second act was my favorite because of the dancing. The movie, I feel like I finally started to click on it once we got to like the first act, and a lot of things kind of start making more sense, especially once you get that point where the teacher is saying like, hey, the universe is inside your brain and stuff. That's kind of when it feels like a lot of things click. But the third act was confusing and sad. The first one was just more interesting to me, of like learning Chuck's background but also sad. And then the whole ending of the bombshell of like Chuck, I want to talk about that. Imagine you're like a relatively young person, right? Like Chuck's in his teens, and you go into this room and you see yourself about to die, and you don't know what age it's going to be. You don't know how you're going to die or when or whatever, or if you're going to like die alone. You just see yourself in like this hospital bed. That's gotta like mentally do something to you, you know? I mean, maybe it could be seen as a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. I mean, maybe if you don't know what you're dying from, dying in a hospital bed, I mean, it is sad, you know, in that moment of like, okay, I'm not going to like live to old age or anything. You're gonna like die relatively young, you know, but maybe it's nice in a sense that you don't see, I don't know the number of ways you could see, like what happens if you like suddenly get hit by a car? Do you see the car in there? Do you see your corpse splattered on the floor? What if you see yourself stabbed and it's like murder, or you did it to yourself or something? There's like a number of ways you could probably see yourself like when you're going to die in there. But the fact that exists, of just a room where you go in and you see how you die, that's pretty crazy. That almost feels supernatural if it wasn't for the fact that like the entire world takes place in Chuck's head. If anything, if it wasn't for the grandfather and the fact that he saw himself die, you know, you could say it's like Chuck as he's dying trying to like put it all together, or it could be that Chuck lived his entire life and knew he was going to die young. But man, it just like really messes you up seeing that at the end. At least it did for me in the groups. That's part of the reason I wanted to make this video. You know how a lot of the time I say, like, I make these and I use it to process, like, my feelings about the movie, to kind of decide how I feel, or the things in it, or to talk about certain scenes or whatever. That's why I needed to do this. It was mostly just because I wanted to talk about that ending and how crazy it is, especially because, like, this movie came out and I never heard anyone, like, really talk about it or anything. Like, I remember seeing the ads, it was in the newspaper, and then it's like, okay, that was it, you know? I mean, I don't know what people's thoughts are on this, or if a lot of people saw it or whatever. I mean, I didn't go to see it in theaters, I watched it, like, months later. So, I don't know how well it did, but I always find movies like this, or kind of like the one I mentioned earlier, the friend at the end of the world or whatever, just kind of interesting to me. Not that they're always fun to watch. I was actually in a really great mood, like, right before I had watched this movie. I was almost going to pick to watch Tangled instead because I had one of the songs stuck in my head. But I picked this because I thought I'm starting the movie in a good mood. So that way, I feel like if I was in a bad mood and I watched this movie, I would have felt so much worse. And instead, I just felt kind of, I don't know what I felt at the end of this movie, but the fact that I started it happy, I think was a good way to go into it. But yeah, this was nuts. It also kind of reminded me of The Truman Show. My friend and I were talking about that. We were talking about that as well, as we were watching it. It kind of gave Truman Show vibes, especially that whole thing of, like, everything sort of revolves around Chuck. Not to the point of, like, the Truman Show, where it's like the entire world, you know, is supposed to be like a TV thing around Truman. I don't completely remember everything with that movie, where he doesn't know he's in the show, and it's like his whole life and everything, but you can sort of see it, like, with the stuff with Taylor, of how people are sort of drawn to Chuck and his image appearing everywhere. That was, like, the scariest. Okay, no, the horror of, like, knowing you're going to die and stuff in the attic room, that is, like, the scariest thing to me in the movie. But, like, the second scariest thing is the part when Chuck's face appears in all the windows and stuff, and nobody knows what the hell it means before the world ends. That was pretty freaky. That's the point where I totally agree with my friends, where if I didn't know any better, I would have thought this movie was a horror movie too. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And the rest of the movies I'm gonna watch with my friends the week are gonna be pretty happy. I'm gonna watch, I think we're watching Muppets later tonight, but it's The Great Muppet Caper. I wanted to watch that because a while ago I watched Muppets Most Wanted, and I loved it. And apparently, and I've seen The Great Muppet Caper before, it's just been a couple years. Apparently there's, like, references and things to that in Muppets Most Wanted, so I thought, hey, I should probably watch it. And then I really, really, really wanted to watch Tangled, because I'm still kind of pissed I can't find it on, like, DVD. Or, I mean, I could go to a store and buy it, but, like, I'd bought it and then the disc wasn't in there, and I'm still kind of upset about that. So I was like, okay, I need to just watch Tangled again. Love that movie. And then I'll be watching Frankenstein. I actually, I don't know when I'm going to post this, so I don't know if these things would have been out or done by then. I'm watching Frankenstein the end of the week. I'm thinking of watching the OG Frankenstein after recording this. I think I probably should. I need to give, like, enough time between the two where I'm not constantly thinking about it while watching the Guillermo del Toro one, but I'm assuming there's going to be references or something. Okay, but yeah, that's Life of Chuck. Pretty good, crazy movie. Not sure if I can recommend to watch this one with friends or not. I don't know if it makes the movie better or worse. Like, sometimes when they were telling jokes and stuff and we were all kind of bonding over that, it made it, like, easier to watch the movie, but it was also just very heavy. And I mean, everyone agreed it was, like, a good movie and stuff when we finished, but I had this weird feeling of, like, maybe I should have watched this by myself instead. I didn't mean to, like, bring down the fun vibe of the group before we watched. All right, so I'm gonna end this here. Bye bye.